Hey, y'all. I am back. It is Angela Smith of Anjanelle and the Anjanelle Online Sewing University, where we help you to master the basics, build your skill set and confidence, and create some of the hottest trends in the fashion industry. And guess what? We're doing it all virtually. Now you can kind of see this sketch that I have out here. I'm going to go through it all step by step. Don't worry. I just had to do something to kind of make this video a little bit shorter, okay, to respect you guys' time. But today we are going to do a very tight, fitted, sexy pencil skirt. All right, let's get into it. Now, the very first thing that you are going to need to do is you are going to have to grab some measurements, and you're also going to have to grab your calculator, and you are going to work some numbers. So let me go ahead and put that on your screen right now. Pause the video, get your measurements, then come back. All right, so you have your measurements. Let's get into what I did here on this particular pattern. So for your pencil skirt, the very first measurement that we're going to work with is your length. Okay, you need to know how long you want your skirt from your waist, whether it's down to your knee, whether it's all the way down to your ankles, however long you want it, you need to determine that first. For me personally, I have a little bit of back there. So when I do it to my knee, I find myself tugging at it a lot. And for me personally, I want my skirt a little bit longer than my knee. I think it's a little sexy when it goes to about the calf muscle, when it's extremely tight and fitted and I'm feeling myself. So that's the length that I'm personally going to do. So first thing I need you to do is pick your length and what you want to do. So for me, that length was 30 inches. Now, let me say I just used a piece of muslin that I already had pre-cut, and it's barely enough. So I put my 30 inches here in the middle, but I'm going to make a note that I'm going to add 1 inch. So I'm going to write that down here. I'm going to add 1 inch for the hem. And up here, I'm going to make a note on my waistline to add 2 inches for the waistband. Okay? That way, when I'm cutting out my pattern, I don't forget. It's right there at the top and it's right there at the bottom. So I'm going to make sure that I have that seam allowance. So the first thing I did was I measured my length. So basically, I added 3 inches. 1, because I like a 1 inch hem at the bottom. If you like a bigger hem, a wider hem, of course, you can do whatever you're most comfortable with. And then my waistband, I'm using elastic, and I'm using a 2-inch elastic. So that's why I added 2 inches to the waistband. Okay, the next thing you're going to need, of course, is your actual waist measurement. But of course, we divided that by 4. So whatever that is at the very top, we are going to make that line using that measurement. First, you're going to just make the dot down here, and you're going to go over whatever that measurement is. Then you're going to make that line. Okay? The next thing that we're going to need is our small hip. Now, the way that you get the small hip, and really what the small hip is, this is your lower abdominal. This is your gut, what some people call it. So you get that by going 10 centimeters down. So from my waist measurement, I went down 10 centimeters, and I'm just going to make a little dot. Then I'm going to go over whatever that measurement was for around my lower abs, okay, my gut area. Because, I mean, if you want it fitted, then you want to make sure you acknowledge this area. If you don't want it hugging your lower abdominal, then this is what you do. You don't worry about the small hip, or you can make it a little bit bigger. You can add a little extra allowance in there, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm going to make my mark for whatever the small hip was, divided by 4. Everything is pretty much divided by 4, you guys, for this particular pattern, because we're taking the circumference, basically the measurement, all the way around your hips, all the way around your waist, and we're going to have 2 pieces to design this skirt, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is, now make sure you're marking as you go, okay? Mark as you go in case you need to use this pattern again, in case you need to add it to a dress or whatever you have your pattern. Y'all know that I'm big on that, okay? Next thing is we're going to go down to our hips, okay? So I took that measurement as well from, again, my lower ab down to my hips and where that measurement was. Now, for me, that was about another 10 centimeters. And for you, it'll probably be about 10 centimeters as well, just knowing how the body is built. But of course, you take your own. But we have 10 inches down, and we're going over whatever that hip measurement was divided by 4. Okay, so in here, it's called, technically, in design school, it's called a large hip, or you could just call it your hips, whichever way. You'll see me switch that up. So we just have our dark lines. Next, we're going to measure from our hips down to our mid-thigh. Okay, so you're taking, for this thing to be fitted, you're taking small measurements, like you're literally piecing this thing together, okay? So now we did from our hips down to about mid-thigh. And for me, that measurement was close to about 10 inches. It was about 9.5. So I went down that, and then I measured my mid-thigh, okay? And I went over. I divided that by 4, and I went over that measurement. And I made my mark. Make sure you do like your little dots. Line it up with your ruler or your yardstick. And then connect it. Because you know you have to be extremely precise when you're making these patterns. Okay? And then I'm just going to mark in here thighs. Okay? Next, we're going to go from our thigh down to our knee. Okay? So I have that measurement in here. And I'm going to just make a little dot. Then I'm going to go my knee measurement. Yes, I went around my knees. I divided that by 4 with just my legs together. You don't clench your legs too tight. Just put your legs together when you're measuring your thighs, when you're measuring your knees, okay? So keep that in mind, not too tight, just together, okay? So around my knee, I took that measurement, divided it by 4, and I added 1.5 inches, okay? I took that measurement and I went over. So for example, around my knee, I had 23 inches. I divided that by 4, and that gave me 5.75. Then I added 1.5 inches to that 5.75, and it got me 7.5 inches, or 7.25 inches. So I'm going to go over the 7.25 inches, and I'm going to mark that. Okay, so that was around my knee. So I'm just going to write knee here. And then I still had a little bit left, because this is how far past my knee I'm actually going. So just about a couple of inches here. So what I did there is at the end of my length, I just made a line. And I'm just going to leave it open. I'm just going to leave it open, and you'll see what I do with that next. So you see all of these lines, right? And then all you're going to do is you're going to just slowly start to connect them. So I took my ruler, and this very bottom one, okay? So this is really going towards my calf muscle, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that line, and I connected it to my knee. Okay. Then you go over to the next line. You take your knee and you're connecting it to that thigh measurement. Oops, got a little bit off there. Okay. Then I went up and I did my thighs connected to my hip. And you're just connecting it. That's why you want to make sure you have your dots and you have precise measurements, right? Even if it looks a little pointy, I'm going to show you what to do. Don't worry. Then you're going to connect your small and large hip. This is where you see kind of like a hard angle. We're going to soften that up. And then, of course, I connected my waist and my small hip. And it's kind of hard there too. So what we're going to do for this one is we're going to just kind of curve it. Curve it in. So you're curving it this way. And then when you get to your hips, just following this line, instead of it being pointy, you don't want it pointy on the hips. You want just a soft curve. So I'm just going through and just at that point, I'm not switching up the measurement. I'm just softening up the curve. And guess what? This is an easy pattern for a pencil skirt. Let's get our fabric and let's get to work and let's put it together. All right, guys. So as you can see, I have my fabric, my black fabric down on fold. I have this pretty studded fabric. Now listen, this is really, really fitted. Just like the pants, you guys, this fabric needs to be really, really stretchy, okay? My fabric stretches one way. And keep in mind, if it stretches one way, you want it to stretch going from side to side, not top to bottom, okay? You need it to stretch this way, get wider for you to squeeze into it, okay? This doesn't have any zippers or anything, so you want to make sure you lay the fabric where it's stretching from side to side. So as you can see, I have my pattern right up against the fold, okay? It's right up against the fold. And this little square right here was because, you know, I always tell you to trace the other half of the pattern. I just didn't get around to tracing this skirt. I went ahead and pinned it up along the fold. You see at the top, I left 2 inches because I wrote on here that I needed to add 2 inches for the waistband. Down here at the bottom, I put that I'm going to add 1 inch for the hem. So I'm not going to forget to put that extra 1 inch down here. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out, for my particular skirt, I purchased about 1.25 yards of this material. And I did some quick measurements while I was there, which I should not have done. I should have been more accurate. But I purchased 1.25 yards, but because, and this fabric is 60 inches wide, but because it only stretches one way, I should have purchased more fabric if I don't want a seam in the front or back of the skirt. But because I did not get enough, see, what I mean is for this pattern, I should be able to put both pieces up against the fold. So one pattern should be here. The other one should be right underneath it up against the fold. But I don't have enough fabric down here. You don't see because the camera cut it off. I don't have enough fabric down here. So instead, I'm going to have all of this left over. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace this pattern and I'm going to put the pattern right here. But what's going to happen is it's going to have a seam in it. I'm going to have to sew it right here. This would be this part. I will have to sew it right down the middle. And I'm going to go ahead and just make that my back. I would much rather have a seam going down the back of my fitted pencil skirt instead of the front, middle of my pencil skirt, if that makes sense. So I'm going to have a total of 3 pieces. This one, because it's on fold, when you open it up, that's 1 piece. And then over here, I'm going to have 2 separate pieces, which is equivalent to that one, okay? Then we're going to just put it together. Put the side seams together. Your side seams are here. Mark that on your pattern if you need to. This is your side seam. This is your center. Okay, center front. And on the other pattern, it'll be your center back. So we're going to go ahead and cut that out. We're going to sew the side seams together. You know how to do that already. Then we're going to attach the waistband. We're going to hem it, and the skirt will be done. All right, so before I put the side seams together and start sewing, I just wanted to show this because I am going to have a seam in my back pattern. You guys, that alters the measurement. So I went ahead and added some additional allowance where the seam is going to be. So now I'm going to sew that so that I didn't alter my measurement. So the allowance that I added for this was 3/4 inches. Okay, I added not a full inch for seam allowance, and then this is going to be my middle back. And the top, that's the allowance that I needed for my waistband, the 2 inches, and the bottom is my 1 inch for my hem. All right, so I have my skirt together. I've already tried it on. I am absolutely in love with the fit, but I wanted to show you a couple of things before we finish this up. I also went ahead and hemmed the bottom. Sew your skirt together. I didn't say this with the zigzag stitch. I just assumed that you knew that using stretchy fabric, but sometimes I have to take a step back and say, hey, this could be their first time watching me. So you want to sew all the way around because this is a super stretchy material. You want to use the zigzag stitch. I tried it on. I have really wide hips, even though I have a smaller waist. But with this material, it's so stretchy that mine actually bulked a little bit at the hips, which means I was able to take some of the measurement off. And that's why you see a difference in both sides, because I wanted to show you before I cleaned it completely up. If I take my pattern back here, you'll notice that I basically cut off the curve. The curve, that's not the center. The curve has basically been removed. So what I did was I went back to my pattern and I used my ruler and just straightened it up. I basically cut off the curve, and I just took my ruler and I just calculated what I did here. And I was able to take off about 1.5 inch off of my pattern. Altogether, if you multiply that by 4, I was able to take 6 inches off of my hips total. So I went back to my pattern, and with pen, I just made a mark, basically telling myself that I'm going to cut this off. But I just wrote, for really stretchy fabric, remove curve, so that the next time I use this pattern, I don't actually have to go back in and alter it. I'll just cut it, fold it back, and just cut it right at that line. If you traced this pattern, then what you can do is go ahead and cut your curve off if you have to make this alteration, okay? You may not. Your skirt may fit absolutely fine. But if you have to make this same alteration that I made, you can also trace this pattern all over again, or the other piece that you trace, cut the curve off of one of them, and then write on your pattern that you need 4, and it's 4 really stretchy fabric, and then keep the original pattern with the curve and use that for non-stretchy fabrics, because you're going to need that extra allowance. It'll be already there in your pattern. So I hemmed the bottom, again, using my zigzag stitch. I'm going to cut that curve off. I just wanted to show y'all what it looks like. So this is what it looks like. Just a more subtle curve than the big curve that I had in here for my hips. And then the last thing that we're going to do is up here at the waistband, we are going to go ahead and attach our elastic. Now this is what my back looks like because I had that extra 3/4 seam allowance. What I did, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to open it. So even though it's the inside of the garments, I like them to look very, very neat and very, very clean. And if you can see the bottom of this, I hemmed it with the seam open as well. So you'll just kind of take your iron and you'll press that very, very flat. And I just love that look at the inside back of the pattern. But anyways, let me turn my skirt right side out for you guys to see. This is the material that I chose. It is a stretch velvet. And it's really, really stretchy, really, really soft. I absolutely love it. So I have my material here, my elastic. I went ahead and cut my exact waist measurement. I overlapped it by a 1/2 inch. And I went ahead and put it together. So I already have it in a circle. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to line that seam up with the back seam of my skirt. I'm going to pin that all the way around. Use my zigzag stitch to attach it. And then don't forget, once we have our elastic, I'll get closer for you. Once we have our elastic lined up with the waistband and we zigzag stitch all the way around, we're just going to fold it down very nice, very tight. You don't want it to be loose, and the elastic will be completely covered. And then at the bottom, you're going to go all the way around again with a zigzag stitch. And that is going to finish up the skirt. I can't wait to show you pictures of mine. Make sure you tag me in yours. You can tag me on social media. Instagram, I am at Designer Angela M. On Facebook, I am just search Anjanelle, and you can definitely tag me. I cannot wait to see your finished garment. Until next time.